I came up with the idea for the long ride a few days ago. My friends and I had met up on Friday evening to hang out, share some stories, and of course, to have a few beers. Long story short, I'd recently lost my job. I was in a kind of a state of limbo in my life. These meetups at the bar may not have been the healthiest outlets, but they were an outlet nonetheless. A chance to blow off some steam. The job hunt was proving slow and unproductive. If I'm being honest, I was somewhat lacking in any motivation to actually go back to work. I had been stuck in the same role for many years. I wanted something new, something exciting in my life. I wanted a challenge. I just didn't know what that was yet. As the night crawled along, I, as per usual, ended up completely plastered. As I sat there, trying my best not to fall out of my chair, my friend Derek mentioned something that got the gears in my brain turning, albeit slowly. He was discussing one of his favorite novels. Being quite intoxicated at the time, I was drifting in and out. But mention of one particular excerpt caught my attention. Something about a guy riding the subway. The conversation then turned into hypotheticals, and it didn't take long for a little spark in my brain to explode. I bet I could do it, I drunkenly slurred, still half dazed.
Do what?
One of my friends, Alex, asked, turning to me. What that punchy guy did. That thing that Derek just mentioned, about riding the subway back and forth.
Oh, it's pinch on, dude. And he didn't do it, he just wrote about it in one of his books.
Yeah, whatever. But I'm sure I could do it too. And you know what? I bet I could do it for an entire week.
What the hell are you talking about?
I paused for a moment, thinking. Okay, so there may not be a subway anywhere around here, but one of our city's many trams suddenly rounded the corner just outside the bar. There, I shouted, pointing. My friends just stared at me, wondering what the hell I was on about. I raised my glass. I hereby accept the challenge, I somewhat slurred out. Alex and Derek just continued looking at me, raising their eyebrows in question. The long ride, I said, with a gleam in my eye, suddenly feeling exhilaration for the first time in a long time. Starting Monday, I'm gonna spend an entire week riding that thing, without getting off.
Why would you even do that?
Derek asked me. I just stared at him for a moment, grinning a sly smile. Because I can, I smirked, before taking a triumphant drink and slamming my glass down on the table.
Oh, this has got to be the dumbest shit you've ever come up with.
Derek mumbled to me. And that is how it all started. The next morning I woke up with a head-splitting headache and utterly hungover. The very first thing on my mind, of course, was this ridiculous challenge that I'd set myself up for. And, God only knows why, I was still set on doing it. I hit up my friends via WhatsApp and I told them I was actually going ahead with this. To be honest, they were less than enthusiastic. They didn't even really seem to care. I was genuinely excited though, and I spent the rest of my weekend getting ready for this adventure, which I had dubbed the long ride. I was going to spend an entire week riding the tram back and forth without getting off. I came up with a simple set of rules, which I promptly shared with my friends in a newly created WhatsApp group. The first rule, of course, was no getting off the tram. Not to go home, not to get supplies, not even to stretch my legs. The second rule was more of an exception to the first rule, detailing when and how I could use the bathroom. Basically, I was only going to allow myself to do this at one specific station. There was a quiet, relatively remote and unused stop, pretty close to the end of the line. This would be perfect. Further to this, if I then missed the tram's departure, the challenge was over. Third rule: every hour, on the hour, I had to record a short video to send to the WhatsApp group to prove to my friends that I was actually still on the tram. The more I thought about it, the more I realised how right Derek was. This really was the dumbest shit I'd ever come up with. And yet, I was also very, very excited about this challenge. But after what happened today, after what I saw, and what else I might see over the course of this week, I decided to share this journey with you guys. Bright and early this morning, at around 6 a.m, I entered my tram line of choice. Line number 4. It was by far the single longest line, going from one end of the city all the way up to the other. A single one-way trip lasted roughly an hour and a half. I also made sure to come prepared and stocked up on pretty much anything I might need. I had gotten my Kindle ready, a couple of books, 7 fully charged power banks, one for each day, enough food and water to, hopefully, last me a week, and a single change of clothes, just in case. All of this I had put away in a gigantic camping backpack half the size of a person. In the early mornings, the city's trams are a crowded hell, filled to the brim with people going to work and students on their way to school and university. This is why I started out a little bit earlier. Getting on board before the work rush, I found myself a seat and I settled in with my giant backpack. I then put in my headphones and began blasting music into my ears to drown out the oncoming hustle and bustle around me. That morning, nothing really strange happened, and I was quite happy when the tram grew emptier and more people started getting off, until only about a dozen remained. For the first time in a long while, I actually looked at my surroundings, the city, and the other people on the tram. Usually I was occupied with my phone or my Kindle. The first few hours of the long ride went by relatively uneventfully. The only thing of note that really happened was an older lady sat down near me when I took out one of the many sandwiches I'd prepared for myself. She ranted on and on about how I wasn't allowed to eat on the tram, pointing at a row of prohibition signs above us. I simply ignored her, and I continued eating, with a slight grin on my face. Before long, she left me be, walking away shaking her head and cursing about how young people don't know manners anymore. She sat on the tram for another half hour or so, and for the entire time, she stared daggers at me. At the very least, though, she didn't follow through on her threat to inform the driver and have me kicked off. That would have been a rather anticlimactic ending to the long ride, I thought, laughing to myself. The first truly strange thing, though, and the reason I'm posting this, happened in the afternoon. Even now, though, as I'm typing this out, I'm really not sure what I saw. Into the afternoon, the tram filled up with people once more. Some were students from the nearby uni, other people getting off work, and of course the children on their way home after a long day at school. One group in particular caught my interest. It was a group comprising of 7 kids. A loud group. They were laughing, yelling at each other, blasting music, jumping around. I silently hated them. As I watched them with growing disdain, I noticed that 2 of them looked exactly the same. And I mean to a T. Same hair, same facial features, same height. Brothers, I reasoned. Most likely twins. The behaviour of the 2, though, that could not have been more different. One of them was acting as energetic as the rest of the group, while the other just stood there, not moving at all. He just watched the rest of the group, who seemed to ignore him entirely. At first I thought nothing of it, but the longer I watched him, the stranger this whole scene felt. Then, slowly, ever so slowly, that child's face grew from a dejected, disinterested look into a grin, an almost hungry grin, one directed at his brother. This went on for almost 15 minutes. His friends never noticed this weird behaviour, and, similarly, the child never seemed to notice me staring. As much as I told myself he was just a child being a child, I couldn't help but find the entire situation weird. Surreal even. That face-splitting grin. It was not normal. This wasn't what a child should look like. Hell, even could look like. I leaned forward, took out my phone, and I was about to take a picture when the tram came to an abrupt halt. Among the hustle and bustle, I lost track of the kids, who had left the tram amongst a multitude of others. Eventually, I caught sight of them again, outside at the station. I noticed something right away. There were only 6 of them now, not 7. One of the brothers, the normal twin, was gone. The other one, he just stood out there, next to his group of friends, not doing anything. A second later, the tram doors slammed closed. In that instant, the kid's head jerked in my direction. His eyes were wide, his face still distorted by that same twisted grin. And he was staring right at me, and only me. And then, he opened his mouth, wider than what should be possible, and he jumped forward as if to throw himself through the glass. I cringed back in terror, away from the window. I toppled over my backpack, sending a handful of supplies onto the floor of the tram. Thanks to a few helpful other passengers, I was quick to pick everything back up. When I stared back up, however, the kid was gone and was now hurrying after his group of friends, seemingly without a care in the world. Even now, I don't know what to make of this. I told myself he was just being a kid, just being stupid after he'd noticed me staring at him. That face, however, that mouth. The thing that's really sticking in my mind, though, was the number of kids. I knew for a fact that there had been 7 before, yet only 6 of them got off. For several long minutes, I scanned the interior of the tram, trying to find that missing twin, to see if, maybe, he had stayed behind on his own. But there was not a hint of him. He seemed to have just vanished. The general hustle and bustle of the day soon evened out as afternoon turned into evening. Then, it picked up once more, once people started setting out to the bars or to meet up with friends. I dozed off about 11 in the evening. I was jerked awake, long past 2 in the morning, when I was almost ripped out of my seat. When I opened my eyes, I found myself face to face with some arsehole who'd just tried to take a hold of my backpack. But I was no fool. Before I'd gone to sleep, I made sure to carefully wrap the strap around my arm. For a few seconds, the guy just stared at me, a dumbfounded look on his face, before he realised what was going on. A moment later, when the tram came to a stop, he rushed away outside. I could only stare after him. This arsehole had just tried to steal my pack. After he was gone, I checked the backpack's contents to make sure nothing was gone. Then, I took out my phone and I started typing this all out. And now, I'm just sitting here, trying to catch some sleep. If I witness any other strange things, or something else of interest happens, I'll keep you all updated. Well, the second day of my little journey is over. The one I came to call the long ride. And boy, do I have a few things to tell you. Things somewhat took a turn for the worse, but more on that later. After sitting in this tram for over 24 hours, I realised just how beautiful my city truly is. It's breathtaking, full of old architecture, nice little parks, and a riverside panorama that few other cities can compare to. That morning, I actually took my very first bathroom break. I have no idea how I lasted that long, but let me tell you, the moment I went, it was heaven. The early hours of the long ride went by as usual. Once again, the tram was overcrowded, and a few times I noticed people staring at me angrily for not getting off my seat, or at least moving my giant backpack aside. Well, tough luck. This row is my home for this entire week. Before you ask, yes, I did specifically choose where I would sit. Third tram car, third row from the back. The first interesting thing to happen that day was an encounter with an older man. He must have entered the tram between 9 and 10 in the morning. I only remember because I had just taken another short video for my friends, and when I looked back up from the phone, there he was, sitting only a few rows ahead of me. It seemed almost as if he'd just appeared out of nowhere. He must have snuck on at the last stop, I reasoned. Strangely enough, he just sat there as the tram continued on to the end of the line station, and he remained seated as the tram turned around and went back the way it came from. I couldn't help but smile a bit, but I was also a bit confused. Were there other people who did the same dumb shit that I was doing? Just riding the tram back and forth for no reason? Well, who knows? Maybe he's a bored retiree or something with nothing to do. Maybe he just enjoys tram rides or the scenery. Or hell, maybe he just prefers to get on the tram a bit earlier and take a brief detour before reaching his destination. I tried my best to not be bothered by him. But whenever I looked up from my book, he was still there, going back and forth and back and forth, right along with me. As I munched on another sandwich and some crackers, I couldn't help but stare at the back of his head. It was 2 PM, and by now, he must have been on the tram for at least 4 hours. What the hell was he doing? I'm not gonna lie, he was beginning to unnerve me a bit. A few minutes later, he got up, and I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that maybe he was about to get off. Instead, he came and took a seat right by me, and he turned his bald head towards me. I noticed that something was wrong with him. His eyes looked glassy, almost hazy. The weirdest part, however, was his outfit. It just didn't fit. Not on his body, I mean, but it didn't fit in the 21st century. It reminded me of something I'd once seen in an old family photo album, a style popular multiple decades ago.
Interesting to see someone here for as long as me,
He finally said. I just stared at him, surprised by the gentle, well-meaning tone of his voice. Oh, yeah, it's, I guess, a dare between friends. I'm trying to see how long I can stay on the tram,
Young people these days.
he mused.
But I suppose I did my fair share of stupid things back in my days.
How come you're on here for so long yourself? Are you enjoying the ride? The scenery? He was quiet, and for a few moments, he just stared outside, watching the city pass by.
Well, you aren't wrong, young man. I've been on here for quite some time. Longer than I'd ever guessed. But it's interesting to see things change. New lines, new stations. Feels just like yesterday that I rode on line 5 to the main station.
What he just said made no sense. There was no line 5. Sure, there had been one, but it was discontinued, and not recently either. I'm talking decades ago. Wasn't line 5 discontinued? I asked him.
Yes, you're right. But once you've been here for as long as me, you sometimes forget these types of things.
What do you mean? Just how long have you been here? For some reason, I suddenly felt cold. Something did not add up. Not just his hazy eyes or his outfit, but the things he was saying.
Much too long, young man. But that's how it is for some of us. We can ride on, but we'll never reach our destination.
What the hell's that supposed to mean?
You should be careful, young man. This place, like any other, has its dangers, especially for those who remain on board for too long.
He said, getting up now. I said nothing in response. I could only watch as he walked on and entered the tramcar ahead of me. Then, for only a single second, what I saw changed. It was only for the blink of an eye, but it made me cringe in terror, and I felt myself breaking into a cold sweat. What had been a nicely dressed older man now turned into a mangled, twisted corpse. Its upper body was caved in, almost torn apart. Its arms were dangling at its side, broken entirely. The worst, however, was this thing's legs. They were nothing but a mass of ground flesh and bone. And then it was over. And once again, I saw nothing but an older man. He turned back to me once more, a well-knowing, sad look on his face, before he gave me a little nod, as if to say, "Be careful." Right at that moment, my phone vibrated, notifying me about a new message. I jerked back in surprise, and I almost dropped it before quickly turning back towards the old man. Or rather, where he'd been. He was gone. I scanned the tramcar ahead of me, then behind me, but I saw nothing. He had just vanished. I couldn't help but shiver. What the hell had just happened? I thought about the mangled, twisted version of him I'd seen, the things he'd talked about. Had I just been visited by a spirit? For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about this. In the afternoon, the tram filled up again, then emptied out again before the process repeated itself in the evening. As it began to turn late, I settled back into my seat, put on some relaxing music, and I prepared myself for another couple of hours' sleep. Hopefully a few more than yesterday. As I sat there, I watched the few other late-night passengers on the tram with me. In my mind, I gave them names and made up little backstories about them. Right there, a few seats ahead of me, sat Jenny, a young woman in her mid-20s who was on her way home after a late shift at the nursing home. Further ahead, sat old Rupert, a bachelor in his early 60s who had just enjoyed a performance at the State Theatre with a group of friends. It was strange, but I almost felt a connection with these people, as if they were my people, the citizens of Tramonia, a nation comprising nothing but this one lone tram, going back and forth, forever. A few minutes later, a group of guys got on. Guys who were clearly drunk. They were a loud, rowdy bunch, walking up and down the tramcar, howling obscenities, and dangling from the handrails like the idiots they were. Almost unconsciously, I felt myself drawn to them, and I couldn't help but watch them. They were breaking the laws of Tramonia, I thought, and they would need to be punished. As I sat in my seat, half nodding off, staring at them, I attempted to come up with ideas on how Tramonia would handle crime and how those who committed them would be punished. I had not realized, though, one of them had long since noticed me staring at him. His expression was not normal, not one of mild curiosity. No, he looked pissed, or at least up for trouble.
"What are you staring at, asshole?"
He called out to me. I jerked up in my seat, averting my eyes, but I could already hear them coming my way. Ah, shit. Now I'd done it.
"Yo, bro, what's up?"
He said, as he sat down in front of me. I didn't say a thing, and instead just tried my best to ignore them.
"Hey, we're talking to you."
His friend spat at me. Nothing. I'm just on my way home, I mumbled.
Oh yeah, is that so?
The one in front of me said, giving me a look that told me in no uncertain terms that this was serious now. I gave him another, yeah, trying to be as non-confrontational as possible. I stared out the window. This promptly landed me a slap against the back of the head. What the hell are you? I couldn't even finish that sentence before one of them grabbed me by the throat, raising his fist.
Oh, you think you can mess with this asshole?
Right at that moment, the driver's voice could be heard coming through the intercom.
Hey, car 3, knock it off right now.
The guys just stared at each other in surprise, but they didn't move, nor did they release me. A second announcement by the driver followed immediately after. This one more serious.
Car 3, again, knock it off. I will stop this tram right here and now and call the cops if y'all don't back off immediately.
That got them to listen, and finally, I was released. After throwing me another set of insults, the three of them walked away. A few stations later, they thankfully got off the tram for good, but not without sending me a few more angry glances. When we pulled into the end of the line station, a place where trams would occasionally power down during the late hours of the night, the driver stepped out of her cabin and approached me.
Hey there, not to bother you, but I've noticed you've been on the tram for quite a while. What exactly are you up to?
Well, I'm trying to get home, but...
You've been trying to get home for the past 5 hours.
Ah, shit. She got me. Alright, no. To be honest, it's a silly bet with my friends, I started, giving her an embarrassed little laugh. She raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to continue. Okay, so I told my friends I'd be able to stay on the tram for an entire week without getting off. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she furrowed her brow before she spoke again.
That's the dumbest freaking thing I've ever heard,
She said, shaking her head. Yeah, it really is, I agreed.
Well, it's not like I can kick you off for something like this. Whatever the hell this is. You've at least got a ticket on you, right?
Yeah, sure do. Got myself a weekly pass, just for the long ride. Once more, she raised an eyebrow, before I awkwardly explained to her that that was the name I came up with for this little challenge.
Well, it's dumb. Really freaking dumb. But as long as you don't cause any trouble, I don't have a problem with it. Just try to stay clear of guys like the ones before.
Sure thing, boss, I said. And with that, the conversation was over, and the driver stepped outside to get some fresh air. About half an hour later, the tram started up again, and the ride continued. That's it for day number 2, guys. See you all tomorrow. After last night's encounter with the group of thugs, I was already quite shaken. I had no idea, however, what day 3 would hold in store for me. I still kept to my people watching, and I still made up those little stories about my few lonely companions during the quieter hours. I just tried to do so not in an overly obvious or annoying fashion. That people watching is actually how I first came to notice a certain woman. She was middle-aged. She wore a long skirt and a blue woolen sweater and she kept her hair tied in a ponytail. At very first glance, there was nothing wrong with her or her behaviour. She was just another normal passenger, getting on the tram at point A and getting off at point B. Things turned strange, however, when I noticed her exiting the tram at one station and then entering the tram again at a later station further along the line. At first, I thought I was mistaken and my eyes were playing tricks on me. This was a big city. Many people lived here, and I was sure some of them were bound to look similar. Yes, as I watched her, I noticed the same skirt, the same sweater, and even the same ponytail. No, this was, without a doubt, the same person. That was impossible. How in the hell had she gotten there within 10 minutes, a good 2 kilometers from where she'd gotten off? I couldn't help but shiver as I watched her getting off again a few stations later, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when she re-entered the tram yet again after a good 15. In total, she entered the tram on 7 entirely different locations in about an hour and a half. Locations impossibly far apart for her to be reaching them so quickly. She was also not the only one. I began to notice others like her, almost a dozen in total. One of them was an older man, about 50 years of age. He wore a suit, carried a briefcase, and I saw him a total of 5 times, disappearing and reappearing at entirely illogical intervals. Some of them were children, just laughing children, entering the tram on their own and then leaving it, then reappearing again a few stations later. They only ever appeared when the tram was empty, or almost empty. At least, that's when I caught sight of them. Whenever I did, however, I could feel the hairs on my neck standing up. And yet, they did nothing strange. They never looked at me. They never even approached me. They just rode the tram. At one point, my eyes met those of an older woman during her 4th iteration, as I came to call it. But she didn't even bat an eye at me. She gave me no attention at all. Still, this was one of the most unsettling things I'd noticed so far, and I tried my best to stay clear of these people. Another strange passenger I encountered today was a young man. He was dressed entirely in black, head to toe. I first noticed him in the early evening hours. He entered the tram, but unlike the other strange passengers that day, he stayed on board, just like I did. For many, many long hours, he just sat there, in the same seat. At times he stared outside, but others, he would watch the people around him. And occasionally, I even found him staring my way. Whenever he did, an unexplainable wave of fear would wash over me, and I couldn't help but squirm in my seat. He gave me the feeling of being a trapped animal, of being prey. The reason was his face. He wasn't merely staring, but grinning. Always grinning. This comically wide grin that almost divided his face. He wasn't grinning at anyone, however. Instead, he seemed to just grin to himself. It was the strangest thing. This did not last though. After some time, he began to turn his attention to others. At one point, I watched as he leaned forward, pushing his face so close to the woman sitting next to him that it almost touched her own. I noticed how clearly uncomfortable she was, but for some reason, she never spoke up. She just sat there, squirming in her seat nervously, almost as if she didn't even see the guy. She was, however, far from being his only victim. He did the same thing to countless other passengers, and none of them ever called him out on this behavior. The longer this went on, the longer I watched what he was doing, the more often I found him staring at me. As much as I told myself to just ignore him, to not draw attention, I just couldn't. I was driven by the strangest sense of curiosity. This guy, whoever he was, whatever he was just wrong. It was shortly past midnight when I noticed the change. For the first time, the guy was not just randomly looking around the tram car. No, now he was fixated squarely on me, grinning right at me. I saw how he leaned forward in his seat, his hands planted firmly by his sides, as if he was about to push himself upwards at any moment. I tried my best to stare outside, to ignore him, but whenever I took a sideways glance, he was still there, still grinning at me. And each time, that grin seemed to have grown wider. Eventually, when I couldn't take it anymore, I was about to get up, to leave my trusty row of seats behind and flee to the back of the tram, when I stopped. The strangest of feelings washed over me, one that told me, in no uncertain terms, to stay right where I was. Somehow, I knew that if I were to get up right now, he would get me. It sounds ridiculous, but I knew. I saw the anticipation on his face, the way his feet shuffled over the ground, and his posture, ready to pounce on me the moment that I would get up. Finally, after half an hour of this game of sitting duck had passed, he just got up and left the tram. Outside, he simply walked off without so much as even looking back at me. Even now, I've got no clue what the hell was wrong with that guy. Maybe it was just some arsehole trying to mess with me. But somehow, I feel he was something far worse. And yet, as terrifying as this half-hour encounter was, it wouldn't be the most terrifying thing that I would witness on day 3. It was later that night, as I sat in my seat, unable to fall asleep, that I noticed the change in scenery. I told myself it was because it was nighttime and because it was dark. But here's the thing. I'd been riding this damn tram for 2.5 days. I knew the areas it passed through. Hell, I knew exactly what buildings were at what stations. Station 17, a giant mall. Station 44, an old hardware store, and so on. But that night, I began to catch sight of new areas, places that were just different. At one point, the tram passed through a street which was lined by nothing but giant, derelict tower blocks. And before long, even the tram tracks themselves appeared to deteriorate. The tram rambled on through this forlorn area, shaking slightly, without ever stopping at any station. We must have been there for at least 10 minutes, without ever stopping, which I know should not be possible. The stops along this line are many and frequent. Wherever we were, it was not line 4 anymore. On the way back, we never passed that particular area again, almost as if it never existed. At other times, the tram took bends and went around corners that should not be there, and drove on through constricted, half-hidden streets and alleys that seemed almost too small for it to pass. Whenever we reached one of these strange places, I couldn't help but stare outside, strangely curious about them. Some streets were so narrow, the tram was only a few inches from the walls of the buildings around it, allowing me to steal glances through open doors and windows. The things I saw were utterly surreal and made me question if I was even awake, or if all of this was nothing but a weird dream conjured up by 2 nights of barely catching any sleep and perpetually being stuck on a tram. In one of the many windows we passed, I was greeted by 4 people. They weren't just inside their apartment, but they were leaning out the window, their faces almost pressed against the passing tram. Their eyes were empty, their faces without any emotion. Yet when they were right beside me, I couldn't help but inch away from the tram's windows, afraid that they might do something. In another window, one belonging to a tiny, inconspicuous building, I looked in to see a giant hall that seemed without end. I saw only the floor, but no walls or ceiling. It just continued on seemingly endlessly, and it was much, much too large for the building that contained it. Yet, from the far back, off in the darkness of the most distant parts of that hall, I thought I could see eyes watching me. Eventually, the tram approached a station in one of these strange areas, and then came to a halt. Outside, standing in the station, I saw a strange figure. At first, I thought it was a drunk person, or maybe someone disabled, given their strange posture. But then, my eyes adjusted, and I realized that something was entirely wrong with this figure. It was some sort of deformed thing. Its limbs were bent at strange angles, seemed to have too many joints in them, and sprouted from places that they just shouldn't. As the tram sat there, it cocked its head slightly in my direction. Then, its head pushed forward, its neck stretching further and further, much further than should be possible. Sweat broke out all over my body as I noticed this ghastly thing measuring me up and down. This time, it wasn't just fear that came over me, but full-on panic. My body started shaking uncontrollably, and I had to cling to the seat in front of me to somehow keep the panic at bay, to not freak out completely at the surreal sight outside. Slowly, the thing moved. It approached the tram door on its long, spidery limbs, and it wasn't long before I saw it beginning to enter the tram. It was coming for me. As it took those few select steps, I hoped, I prayed that it would stay where it was. I think in the state that I was in, I spoke, maybe even yelled those words repeatedly through the empty tram, until, thankfully, the doors closed and we left that waking nightmare behind. For the next few minutes, I just sat there in my seat, my eyes closed, my knees below my chin, rocking back and forth like a scared little child. Eventually, when I opened my eyes again, all was normal, and the tram continued on its usual route, and did so for the rest of the night. By now, it's early morning. I haven't been able to sleep yet. I just couldn't. Whenever I was about to doze off, I was afraid I would wake up at some unfamiliar, surreal location again. And this time, something might actually get in. Instead, I spent the last hour typing this all out, just to try and calm myself down. To be honest, I actually thought about giving up. To just get off and call it quits after what had happened. But then, I thought about it. I was on day 3. On day freaking 3. If I stopped now, my friends would never let me live it down. More than that though, as scary as these experiences could be, they were also strangely fascinating. I know it sounds crazy, but it's not every day you experience things like this. Flashes of parallel universes, or glimpses beyond the veil, or whatever the hell this was. Don't get me wrong, it scared the crap out of me. But another side of me wanted to see more. To know more. If I gave up now, I would probably regret it. Forever wondering what else I might have seen on the long ride. So I guess I'll keep going. At least for a while longer. See you all tomorrow. Hello there, everyone. Day 4 is officially over, and it was a strange one, to say the least. It was also similarly terrifying as the prior day, for various reasons. As I said, I hadn't slept, and even after I'd typed out the day's events, I wasn't able to. In the early morning, the first people on their way to work entered the tram, and I knew damn well I wasn't going to get the chance to catch any sleep for at least the next hour or two. And so, before things grew too crowded, I set out for another bathroom break, and also to quickly change my clothes. I might be a bit of a weirdo or, hell, even an idiot for doing this long ride, but I'd prefer to at least not look and smell like a freaking hobo while doing so. It didn't take long, and once I'd pushed my used clothes to the bottom of my backpack, I quickly scrambled back onto the tram and set off once again. Needless to say, it was packed by this point, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. Once the tram approached the city's outskirts, I could finally return to my trusty row of seats. Once there, I put in my headphones, turned on some lo-fi mix, and I settled down for some sleep. I guess I really was exhausted, because I promptly slept through the rest of the morning and almost the entire early afternoon. When I woke up, I had a stiff neck and a painfully twisted back. Those damn tram seats really are not comfortable at all. I cursed at myself for not investing in a travel pillow. It would have been around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after another one of my short hourly updates, when my friend Derek hit me up. He asked me if I was messing with them by posting old videos, or if I really was still at it. I assured him I was still on the tram. After all, I told him, I set out to do this for an entire week. I did mention, however, that I would see how it went, given certain things that have happened. When he asked me what that meant, I thought about telling him about what I'd seen last night, but there was no way he'd believe me. He said he was out in the city right now, and he asked me when I would be passing by our city's central mall. After a quick check, I told him I'd be there in about an hour. He was quick to tell me he'd join me for a couple of stations, see how I was holding up. The moment he said this, I got an idea. Sure, I still had some sandwiches left, but to be honest, I was getting sick and tired of the same old ham and cheese ones by now. So I asked Derek if maybe he'd be willing to pick me up some supplies. He told me to just get off the damn tram and get them myself. But I told him that would be breaking the rules. I then offered to pay him double for anything he might bring me. We ended up exchanging a few more messages before he yielded and said he'd do it. I thanked him profusely before giving him the time my tram should be arriving at the mall station. And wouldn't you know it, there he was, holding 2 shopping bags in his hands. He noticed me the moment the tram arrived, and he sat down in the row in front of me.
You know you're a frickin' idiot, right?
Derek said, laughing.
You're really set on doing this an entire week. Why?
I shrugged. Made it halfway already. Can't call it quits now.
Oh, this really is the dumbest shit you've ever done. Also, you look like shit, dude.
Can't sleep for shit on a tram, you know.
Oh, well, no shit, idiot.
He said, shaking his head before handing me the grocery bags. The first bag contained an assortment of snacks, some canned food, and even a few vegetables. When he handed me the second bag, my eyes grew wide. It was full of cans also, but the best kind of cans. Beer. I looked up at him, smiling, and he gave me a shrug.
Thought you'd want to have a drink every once in a while.
Sure do, man. Sure do. After the shit I've seen. He raised his eyebrows at this, but I gave him a dismissive gesture. Yeah, it's nothing. Don't worry about it.
Well, I gotta go, dude. Still got a ton of things to do, and not everyone can just sit around doing stupid shit all day. You know, some of us have got jobs and all.
He said, giving me a wink. Yeah, whatever, man, I said, laughing and giving him the finger. He jumped off at the next station and I was on my own again. Gotta say, it felt damn good to actually talk to someone. Most of this long ride, it was pretty damn boring. I guess today would be slightly different though, I thought, as I pulled out the first of the many beer cans. It was late in the afternoon anyway, so I might as well have some fun. Now, there are rules against getting plastered on the tram, and technically against drinking at all, but no one really cares to enforce them. So cheers, and bottoms up. I did do my best to be as inconspicuous as possible, but still, I did notice a few glances from people here and there, especially the hard-working, productive members of society on their way home from work, who couldn't help but frown at the idiot happily drinking his beer at 5 PM on the tram. Yeah, I felt a bit guilty. As the evening progressed, and I got drunker and drunker, I began to notice strange things again. Same as the day before, I noticed those same kinds of people getting on and off the tram at various stations. Some of them I actually noticed I'd seen before. Others were new to me. They all creeped me out though, even in my drunken state. As the night went on, the tram began to pass by odd places again. It felt almost as if the longer I was on, the more consecutive hours I spent huddled in the same place, the more my reality wavered and the more surreal it became. The first of these bizarre sights that I saw was a giant playground, one much bigger than any other I'd ever seen before. The tram rode past it for almost an entire minute. I saw a giant steel climbing frame that rose up into the sky, and I saw an entire small town comprising nothing but wooden forts, ladders and slides. It was nothing short of absolutely surreal. Even stranger though, even now, in the darkness of the night, the place was still populated by a multitude of kids. A shiver went down my spine as I watched what was happening out there, and I was more than a little relieved when we finally left that place behind. I saw the next unreal location, or unlocations, as I came to call them, about an hour later. The tram made its way through the alternative part of town, riding past bars and clubs, before, eventually, it approached a building I'd never seen before. The tram rode towards it, before it began sneaking around the place. Holding tight to my can of beer, I stared at it in fascination. This place was exclusively lit up by red lights and covered in an assortment of signs proclaiming it to be the destination of dreams, the place to be for the night. And above it all, the name Club Red sprouted from the wall in giant neon letters. The entire building was filled to the brim with people, even on a Thursday evening. As we rode on past it, I could hear music, but not normal music. Far from it. It was this strangely warped, droning type of music, one you might call psychedelic. But it felt almost too random for that. Honestly, it was less of a song and more like a random assortment of sounds. Something that was trying desperately to have a melody, but somehow was not able to get it quite right. As I continued staring at the building, my eyes began to hurt. At first, I thought it was just the red light, but the longer I focused on it, I realized it was the building itself. Things just didn't add up. I don't know how to explain it, but the layout didn't make sense. I stared at the windows, one after another. Eventually, it clicked. There were too many of them to fit the front of the building. Okay, picture this. Imagine a building whose ground floor comprises nothing but 4 giant windows. Now, imagine the floor above has 7 windows of exactly the same size and spaced out exactly the same as the ones below. That shouldn't work. It should be physically impossible. Yet, there they were. It was the strangest optical illusion I had ever come upon, and when I saw it, my brain refused to handle it. It just couldn't understand this warping of the laws of physics. In all of these windows, I saw people. They were pushing and shoving against each other. Some were dancing, others leaning outward. And here and there, I even saw some of them sitting out on the windowsills. The building's size too, that made no sense either. It wasn't big, nothing more than a handful of floors. At least, I thought so at first. When we got closer though, and I stared upwards, I could always find yet another floor above the one I was looking at. Each one of them became more and more surreal, bigger, and covered in more details, sprouting more windows. I even saw balconies, bridges connecting different parts of the building, and staircases that snaked around the building's outer walls, leading up and down, in and out. It was an amalgamation of architectural impossibilities. These people as well. Not just what they were doing, but they became stranger the longer I watched. At first, it seemed to be normal people, just partying. But then, I noticed movements that didn't make sense. Figures twitching, convulsing in ways that defied human anatomy. Their forms as twisted as the building they were in. At one point, I even laid eyes on what I assumed to be some kind of ghastly ritual or sacrifice. The tram rounded another bend, and we came upon rows and rows of seats, chiseled into the building itself. It reminded me of a concert hall or a stadium. It was massive, and it was packed to the brim with people. Distorted people. They were all watching the street below, watching the tram, and maybe watching me. They seemed to go crazy for it, applauding, laughing, and pointing as we rode by. Each time we rounded the corner, I thought we'd be done, and we would finally leave this impossibility of a building behind. But we didn't. At first I thought maybe we were circling it, but each corner greeted me with yet another part of it, each one stranger than the last, and in each one, more twisted and depraved things were happening. Eventually, I just couldn't handle it anymore. My head was hurting too much. I turned and I watched the other side of the street. All the while, the building's dim, red light still flooded the tram. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was over. The red light was gone. So was the music. And the tram continued on its normal course. I turned around and stared back, but all I saw was a long, straight road, one that led through the city's alternative area. All I saw were the same well-known clubs and bars. I know I should have been unsettled. I know I should have been freaking out. But somehow, I was almost used to the strangeness of these unlocations by now. A few minutes later, I took out my phone and I looked for a place called Club Red. But I already knew what I'd find. Nothing. There was no sign of any such club ever having existed in my city. And to be honest, I was more than happy about that. Finally, I settled down in my seat, turned up my music, and continued drinking my beer before drifting off to sleep. When I woke up, I felt slightly hungover, but still pleasantly buzzed. My neck was in terrible pain yet again. I cursed, and I rubbed it for a good minute before I shrugged and decided to have another beer. Who knows? Maybe it would help me get back to sleep again. It was only when I opened the can that I realized the tram was not empty anymore. No, it was packed. As if this wasn't strange enough, the tram was entirely quiet. No one was speaking. No one was moving. Everyone was just sitting in their seats, unmoving, staring straight ahead. I knew instantly that something was wrong. Even though I felt cold, sweat broke out all over my body. For a moment I just sat there, trying to hide my presence. But then, drunken curiosity won over fear. I turned my head to see the person sitting in the row next to mine. What I saw made me freeze. Not normal. This was not a normal person. What I saw was a face that was undescriptive. It looked almost like a blank slate, as if someone had forgotten to add all the characteristics and details that make someone a human being. Even though the person was only about a meter away from me, I could not tell if they were a man or a woman, or if they were human at all. My drunken eyes wandered over the rest of the passengers near me, and I realized they were all the same. All of them were empty, for lack of a better word. Even in my drunken state, even though I downed 9 beers over the course of the night, fear washed over me. Seeing these weird things outside was one thing. You felt strangely safe inside the tram, protected by its mighty steel chassis. But now it was happening inside as well. I felt very, very vulnerable and very afraid. I began to shudder, and I had to will myself to be quiet, to not move. What the hell even were those things? Why were they here? Once more, my eyes darted around, but then I told myself to stop. Do nothing. Say nothing. Just sit here. Wait until they're all gone, or they get off the tram. Don't let them notice you. If they do, if they realize you're here, they might... No, stop. Calm down. I put one of my hands on my knees to stop my leg from shaking. With the other one, I clutched onto the beer like a safety anchor, and I just continued drinking, or tried the best I could. Then, I turned to look outside, to watch my city pass by. To be honest, I expected to find another unlocation outside to see that I had ended up at yet another alternative plane of existence. The place these things belong to, maybe. This time, however, the outside was just empty. There was no city at all. There was nothing. All I saw was undescriptive ground. It was as empty as all the people around me. Another blank slate, devoid of any meaningful detail. Where the hell was I? How had I ended up at a place like this? When I looked out and saw the tram approaching a tunnel, I started shaking again. At this point, I almost lost it, and I freaked the hell out. This did not feel like the other unlocations before. This one felt different. So far, there was one thing that had never changed. The tram was always outdoors, no matter how much its surroundings had changed. But now, I wondered if this was the end. If this tunnel would just swallow me up to never return. I cursed at myself to stop once more, to just go back to sleep, wait until morning. And yet, I couldn't. All I could do was to watch as the tunnel's dark, dilapidated walls passed by me. Then, after many, many long minutes, the tram left the tunnel behind, and we arrived at a station, if you could even call it that. It was a quiet, unrefined place. There were no lights, no details, no maps or departure schedules. It was nothing but a single, unremarkable platform. Yet the moment the tram stopped and opened its doors, all of these strange people got to their feet and, in unison, filed out of the tram. After only about a minute, I was alone. I stared outside and I watched as they walked away, vanishing into the darkness of the night. I just sat there, absolutely stunned at what I was seeing. Moments later, I was snapped out of my haze as the tram's driver, the same one I had spoken to on night 2, approached me. She came practically running through the tram's cars, her face distorted by a mixture of fear and confusion.
"We've made it, sir,"
she said in a shaking voice.
"This is the end. You've got to get off. You've reached your destination."
For a moment, I just stared at her. Then, towards the tram doors, and the dark, undescriptive plain outside, and I shivered. No, I can't. I've got to get back to the city. Whatever this place is, I don't belong here, I said to her, with pleading eyes. The moment she heard my voice, she practically stumbled backwards. She quickly composed herself, measured me up and down, noticing my backpack and the can of beer I was holding. A few seconds later, she just nodded and without another word, headed back to the driver's cabin. We stayed at this strange station for a while longer, and I could feel the driver watching me via the tram's security camera the entire time. I don't know what this place was. I don't know how I ended up there, but I knew I shouldn't have. It was not a place on any map. It was not a place that should be reached by anyone. And yet, it was there. It was a place even further detached from reality than all of those other unlocations I'd come upon before. Or maybe I was just too goddamn drunk. With that, I opened up beer number 10, settled back in my seat, and eventually, the tram's doors closed, and we drove on through the night. After only 10 minutes, we were back in the regular city. It was an instantaneous change, one I missed entirely. At one moment, I was staring at the same devoid landscape outside, and then, suddenly, I was staring at buildings once more. I breathed a sigh of relief, and finally, I began to drunkenly type this all out. It took a lot longer than usual, almost 2 hours, and by now, the morning rush has already begun. My head hurts, both from drinking and the noise of the people around me, but also from trying to understand what I'd seen last night. Either way, that's it for now. See you all tomorrow. I know there's more weird shit to come. The long ride continues, and I'm sure the weirdness does as well. I'm gonna try and catch some sleep now. Wish me luck, guys. Hey there, everyone. I've officially made it through day 5 of the long ride. Quite a few things happened today, but while some of them were strange and terrifying, I also had a rather interesting conversation with a fellow passenger. Still trying to figure out what to make of that though. The morning started fantastic right off the bat. After I'd typed out the events of the previous night, I felt like utter shit. I was hungover, the tram was overcrowded, and the collective noise of all those people cut through my brain like a searing knife. Eventually, I just didn't care anymore. I pulled out one of the remaining 2 cans of beer Derek had gotten me, and I decided to down them, hoping that maybe it would ease my hangover, allow me to sleep. Needless to say, people weren't too happy about it. As I said, no one really cares to enforce the no drinking on the tram rule, but that didn't mean people were going to be happy to see you sitting there drinking in the early morning hours. I opened my can of hangover cure beer, took a deep sip, and I could already feel the pain in my brain receding. I leaned back, took a deep breath, and then took another sip. This behavior did not go unnoticed, of course. I saw the stares, and I could almost hear the whispers. But honestly, I couldn't care less. I was just too damn exhausted. A moment later, I felt someone's hand resting on my shoulder. When I turned, I saw an older man. His attire screamed blue collar. He was staring me down, waiting for me to take out my headphones. The moment I did, he spoke up.
Drinking first thing in the early morning, eh? Can't even be bothered to shift your backpack to make room for other people.
I just looked at him, and I was about to give him a swift, screw you. But he wasn't the only one laying into me.
There are children here, you know? Can't you at least think about what an example you're setting for them?
A woman from the row across from me chimed in.
How about you just move the damn backpack and get up? Maybe standing for a bit might help you to sober up.
Mr. Blue Collar spat at me. Without even waiting for an answer, he grabbed a hold of my backpack and was about to pull it off the seat. I was quick to hold it in place with my free hand. This time, I said to him out loud, "Piss off." He did not like me mouthing off one bit, and this time, he pulled on the backpack with all the force he could muster. The pack slid off the seat, and I was promptly pulled off after it. In the process, I spilled a good chunk of my beer all over myself. I cursed aloud, only to be greeted by snickering and more whispers all around me.
Already drunk at this time of the day. Pathetic. Really,
said the lady, shaking her head.
Probably homeless, slept on the tram all night,
said the man who had just ripped me out of my seat.
Should just kick him off,
I heard a teenager say to her friends, who enthusiastically agreed with her idea. Jesus Christ, fine, I finally said, and I got up from my seat. I grabbed a hold of my backpack and pushed myself through the more than annoyed crowd of passengers, trying to find myself some room. As I did, it felt like every set of eyes on that tram was staring at me. Some people moved out of my way, their disgust at my drunken behaviour visible on their faces, while others weren't shy to elbow me or shove me aside, trying to provoke yet another scene. Eventually, I found myself a spot near the doors, pushed myself up against the side wall, and I began massaging my temples. I still heard people whispering, and I could still feel the glances. Yeah, you can all go screw yourselves, I thought. But some were not just satisfied by mere whispers and glances. When the group of teenagers from before got off the tram, they all bumped into me. One of them so hard I almost lost my footing. He was clearly trying to impress the girl who had mouthed off about kicking me off the tram earlier. I don't know what it was, but that pushed me over the line, and in an instant, I jerked around and I pushed the little prick. He tumbled off the tram and fell to the ground. He got up a second later and clearly was about to throw a punch, but then froze. His eyes grew wide. Fear distorted his face, and he cringed back in horror, just staring at me. He opened his mouth, but then closed it again. His friends asked him why he didn't punch me, but he was not able to say a damn word. Now, I'm sure I look like shit, probably resemble a homeless person, but that reaction, that fear, it wasn't normal. I don't know what he saw. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was something else. But it made me more than a bit anxious. I just stood there as the tram doors closed again. Could it be that whatever otherworldly influences I'd been subjected to had done something to me? Before I could ponder on this any longer, though, the same man from before was yelling at me again, telling me he'd have no problem kicking my drunk ass off the tram if I were to ever do anything like that again. Eventually, more and more people left the tram, Mr. Blue Collar among them. He gave me one more angry stare before he got off. As he did, I heard him mumbling to himself something about worthless scum. Soon enough, only a handful of people remained on board, and finally, I could return to my trusty row of seats. I considered opening the last can of beer I'd left, but I could tell the driver had it out for me because of the earlier commotion. Unless I wanted to get kicked off for real, I'd better lie low for a bit. So instead, I decided to just settle in, close my eyes, and catch some sleep. I was awoken in the late afternoon to the sound of someone knocking against the tram window. I jerked up, turned, but I saw no one. Great, I thought. Probably a bunch of kids messing with me. But then I saw him. There was a man, standing a couple of meters away, just on the other side of the street. He was staring at me. His face showed a slight cheeky smile, as if he'd just played a trick on me. And as if to make it even clearer, he made a little knocking motion with his hand. So it had been him, but how? How could he have been able to knock against the glass from over there? I mean, there was no way he'd been fast enough to knock and then cross a busy street. My gaze remained fixed on him until the tram drove off. The moment it did, his smile grew a tad bit wider, and he slowly raised his hand to wave at me. I don't know why, but he instantly crept me out. The hell was wrong with that guy? I shook my head. No, don't think about it. It's probably just some idiot who saw me jerk awake and decided to screw with me. At least, that's what I told myself, until we arrived at the next station. I had just been sitting there, staring outside, but the moment we pulled in, I noticed a person waving. At first, I thought it was someone waving at a friend or one of the other passengers. But then I recognized him. It was the same guy. That same freaking guy from the last station. How had he gotten there so quickly? He was still smiling, but now he seemed to have moved a tad bit closer to the tram. By now, I probably should have been used to these strange events, and I should have just ignored it. Hell, I should have come to see it as just a normal part of my day. But I just couldn't. Something about this really got under my skin. I don't know why, but him looking entirely normal, his smile non-threatening, that was so much worse than any of the ghastly grins I'd seen so far. I told myself once more to look away, to ignore him, to focus on my music. But I found myself drawn back to him again and again. Finally, we drove off again, and once more, he waved at me, his eyes trailing after me. When we pulled into the next station, I somehow knew that he would be there. We were still a good 100 meters away, but I could already see him there, waiting for me. And as the tram pulled in, he waved at me again. Once more, he seemed to have gotten closer. I couldn't help but squirm in my seat. That freaking smile. Every time the tram pulled into a new station, the guy was there. And every single time, he was doing the same thing, happily smiling and waving at me. I've seen loads of weird shit so far, but this was just too damn bizarre. Eventually, I did it. After more than a dozen stations, I just couldn't take it anymore. I raised my hand and I waved back at him, just to see if anything would happen, if anything would change. The moment I did, there was indeed a change. His hand went down, his eyes grew wide, his smile grew bigger, and then, after staring at me for another few seconds, he just left. A wave of fear like no other washed over me, and I started shivering. I had no idea what I had just done, but I knew that I had made a mistake. A big mistake. As I sat there, shaking in my seat, I couldn't help but just stare at the internal departure schedule to see when we'd pull into the next station. What if that guy was there again? What if he was waiting for me? Or hell, what if he would try to get on the tram and come for me just because I reacted to him? Then, the announcement of the next station was broadcast over the internal speaker by a friendly, yet monotonous voice. I froze. There he was. At least I thought so at first. But then I realized I was wrong. It was another person, another man, just waiting for the tram. That waving guy was not there. Yet, as I sat in my seat, I knew this wasn't over. Slowly, ever so slowly, afternoon turned to evening, Friday evening, which meant the tram was going to be packed the entire night. I watched as teenagers and older people alike flooded into the tram. I saw guys dressed in suits, girls in short skirts and knee-highs, older ladies in classy dresses, and even a group of guys in sweatpants carrying 2 cases of beer. Just about the entire city was out to party tonight. The later it got, and the more alcohol people seemed to have consumed, the more excitable they became. There was a group of drunks bellowing a raunchy song through half the tram. Over there, a couple making out. And further ahead, I saw a group of girls so scarcely clad, you might think it was the middle of summer. I even noticed 2 older gentlemen, costly dressed to shared a bottle of disgustingly strong herb liquor between themselves. For hours I watched the going-ons and the various people out tonight. To be honest, it was interesting. And for the first time, I found myself ignoring the outside of the tram. Not looking for any weird locations, but instead just people watching. It was at about 2 a.m, when the tram grew emptier, that she entered. She was the most gorgeous woman that I had ever seen, and my eyes grew wide. Her hazel eyes wandered over the tram in search of a seat, and I watched as she brushed aside a rebellious strand of brown hair that dangled in front of her face. For a second, all the noise in the tram died down, and everyone seemed to stare at her. Then, slowly, normalcy returned. Or at least, a sense of normalcy, for she was still the center of attention. The strangest thing, however, was how plainly she was dressed. Instead of a fancy evening dress, she wore a pair of roughed-up jeans and a white tank top. But to me, this just made her even more beautiful. As her well-measured steps led her through the tram, I couldn't help but stare at her. I told myself to look away, to stop being so obvious, but I couldn't. This girl, whoever she was exactly my type. Then, she noticed me. In an instant, I averted my eyes. Shit, I'm acting way too creepy. I did my best to just turn away and stare out the window. But then, only a few moments later, she was right there, standing next to my row of seats.
Hey there. Is this seat available? Or is it reserved for your backpack?
She asked, giving me a hint of a smile. Oh, Jesus Christ. I can die happy. Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, it's reserved. Not reserved. Available. I mean, just let me get this out of your way. With that, I heaved the heavy backpack over to my side, and then, with all the force I could muster, pushed it between my legs. It barely fit, and I was damn sure I'd just ruined a fair bit of the food still inside. But I didn't care. I'd have thrown the damn thing out the window if it meant having 5 minutes with this girl. She watched my efforts, slightly giggling, before she sat down next to me.
So, are you out to party?
She asked. Her voice was pure seduction, and the smile she gave made my blood rush through my veins. No, I'm... Oh, shit. What the hell do I tell her? If I told her what I was really doing, she'd probably think I was the biggest freaking idiot on planet Earth. Which, honestly, wasn't too far from the truth. No, I'm going somewhere, I eventually said. She mused.
Why don't the two of us go somewhere together? To be honest, I'm really bored tonight. And I'm looking for a bit of fun. You know.
After she said this, she gave me a little wink. Believe me, I wanted to. I really wanted to. But I couldn't just give up like that. Could I? No way. Not when I had already made it to day 5. Then, she put her hand on my leg, caressing it slightly.
Why not take a chance for once?
At that moment, I was done. To hell with the long ride, to hell with the tram, to hell with Derek, who'd most likely call me out for giving up. I did not care anymore. The tram rumbled on, and then it came to a stop. At that moment, she got off her seat and she held out her hand towards me. Without even thinking, I took it and I got up myself. But before I could leave my row of seats behind, something unexpected happened. Some idiot, who must have sat behind us and was on his way towards the tram doors as well, bumped right into her. Her hand was torn from mine, and she stumbled a few steps forward. I was about to yell at him, but at that moment, something changed. She changed. For the briefest of moments, the beautiful girl in front of me wavered, for lack of a better word. In an instant, her brown hair and hazel eyes vanished, and something not human replaced her face. A monstrosity comprised of nothing but bone and scar tissue. I cringed back, almost toppled over my seat, and crashed hard against the tram's side wall.
Sorry about that.
I heard from behind me, and when I turned, I saw a scruffy-looking older dude. When I turned back towards the girl, she was all hazel eyes and brown hair again.
Are you okay?
Are you still coming?
This time, when she spoke, the illusion was not complete. And for a moment, her face was now replaced by what I recognized as some kind of beak. And the hand she held out to me was nothing but a twisted set of claws. Once more, I pushed myself against the side of the tram. When she saw my reaction, her entire act fell apart. Her smile was gone. Her eyes had turned hard, and an expression of pure and utter hatred came over her face. For a second, I thought the thing might throw itself at me. But then she just walked off. I couldn't help but stare after her. After it.
Wouldn't look for too long if I were you, or you might fall for it again.
The scruffy guy said.
Care if I take a seat?
I measured him up for a moment, wondering if this was another trick, another ploy by some strange thing to get close to me. But when I saw no sign of ill will on his face, I nodded. Thank you, I guess, I eventually said. The dude gave me a shrug. As he did so, a rain of dandruff descended from his head, and I couldn't help but inch away from him. Now that I had time to get a better look at him, I saw that he wasn't just scruffy. He was dirty. His clothes were nothing but rags, and he smelled worse than I did after 5 days on a tram. He must be a homeless man, I reasoned. Probably on the tram for the night to catch some sleep in a warm place. How did you know about this thing? The guy chuckled, but then started to talk. When he did, I could smell disgustingly heavy liquor on his breath.
When you live where I do, you catch on to a thing or two. I've seen it before. Almost fell for it once myself.
What the hell is it?
Haven't got the slightest clue, but sure is nothing good, I can tell you that.
As I stared ahead, I saw that the woman had already found herself another guy and was seductively talking to him. A moment later, I watched as she pressed her mouth against his, and I couldn't help but shudder.
What is it you see?
The guy next to me asked. What do you mean?
The thing. What's it look like to you?
Oh, brown hair, hazel eyes, wearing jeans and a tank top. He laughed.
See, that's how it gets you. Knows what type of woman we like, then shows it to us.
I watched as the woman got off her seat, the guy she'd sat with trailing after her. I was about to get up, to do something, but for just a single second, she shot me a threatening glance. That made me freeze. A moment later, she had dragged the guy from the tram. My eyes wandered towards the station, towards the two of them. The guy was still grinning like an idiot, enamored by what he assumed to be the girl of his dreams. As they went on their way, I could see their shadows cast by a nearby streetlight. His was normal, but hers was entirely different. It was that of a giant, lurking thing, something akin to a sort of bird. A bird of prey. The image of a vulture appeared in my mind, ready to devour its prey. Then, the doors closed, and the tram drove off, leaving the two of them behind, and the guy to whatever terrible fate this thing had in mind for him.
So, what's your deal?
The guy ended the silence. What do you mean?
You've been sitting here with no intention of getting off, carrying that bloody big backpack with you. You sure don't look like party people to me.
Huh. Guess I really stuck out. In a few words, I told him about the long ride and that I was already on day 5. When he heard this, his face grew dark.
Doing a stupid thing like that?
He said, shaking his head.
Staying on here for so long, even overnight. The hell's wrong with you?
Well, aren't you doing the same thing? I mean, aren't you on here to catch some sleep?
God no. I might live on the streets, but I ain't stupid. I'm just on here to get away from those damned party people. Can't sleep with all that shouting and whatnot. Stayed on here once, but it's not worth it. Not with all the crazy shit happening.
Crazy shit? What exactly do you mean? He stared at me for a moment.
Sure, you must have noticed them by now. The people who just up and vanish, strange entities, like that thing before. And I'm sure you've seen them too. Places, buildings, structures, neighbourhoods that shouldn't be there, but somehow are. Like this one.
With that, he pointed outside, and I saw we were passing by another unlocation. This time, it was a scrapyard. A huge, constricted place, looking almost labyrinth. As I focused on it more, I saw its giant heaps comprised nothing but old, rusty toys, all of them stacked upon one another. I shuddered as I saw strange figures shuffling around between these heaps. Figurines that seemed as mechanical as the rest of the place. Eventually, I gave the guy a nod, and I began telling him what I'd seen over the past few days. When I told him about that waving man, and that I had waved back to him, he suddenly cut me off.
You did what?
He asked in shock. Like I said, I waved back. Why?
God damn it. Tell you what.
He started, leaning over towards me, staring at me.
You better get off this damn thing right here, right now.
Why? What's gonna happen? What's he going to do to me?
Ain't gonna do a damn thing, but now he knows you're on here and that you've seen him. He's marked you, and now others know as well.
What others?
God knows what they are. Might be ghosts, might be demons, might be something else entirely. They sure are trouble. As I said, best to call it quits now. Call off your stupid game and get off.
Well, I wish I could do that. But to tell you the truth, I'm prepared to see this through. Once more, the guy shook his head.
Wouldn't do it if I were you, but I guess you've made up your mind.
After he said this, he got off his seat.
Well, time to get going. I sure don't like taking my chances.
I gave him a nod. Well, thanks for the warning. Oh, hold on. Here, for saving me. With that, I handed him my last can of beer. The guy's face lit up the moment he saw it. He almost tore it from my hands, and it vanished into one of the many pockets of his jacket.
I'll say it once more. Get off this thing, while you still can.
He then made his way towards the tram doors, and once the tram came to a halt, he left it behind. Outside, I found him looking at me, giving me a well-meaning nod before he walked off. For the next hour, I sat in my seat, thinking. He said I'd been marked, but what exactly did that mean? I thought that he was just some crazy hobo, but it was clear he knew what was going on here, and he knew more than I did. I cursed myself for not having asked him to stay on longer, to share more information. Well, nothing I can do about it now. So, instead, I typed out my experiences of day 5. It's close to 5 in the morning now, and I'm getting tired. But I don't think it's a good idea to go to sleep. At least, not until the sun is up. That's it for now. See you all tomorrow. At least I hope so. Hey there, everyone. sorry for the lack of updates. After what happened on day 6, I just needed a few days to get myself together and to get some well-needed rest. Things got out of hand, more so than any other day before. And honestly, I'm very lucky to even be here writing this. But more on that later. Let me start day 6 by telling you about my encounter with a familiar face. It was the man who I'd met on day 2. This time, he wasted no time and sat down next to me right away.
So, you're still here?
He said. Same as you. Guess we both enjoy riding the tram, I said, half jokingly.
It's not all fun and games, young man, but I'm sure you know that by now, given how long you've been on here.
Sure do, I said, laughing. He did not join in though, and instead gave me an expectant stare. And so, I told him all about my experiences over the course of the past few days. When I told him about the strange, undescriptive people and that odd station that I'd encountered on day 4, his expression changed. It became one of sadness, of longing, but he said nothing. Eventually, I told him what had happened the day prior, about my encounter with the waving man and what the homeless guy had told me.
That's man's right indeed. You've been on here a long time now. As I told you, staying on board too long has its dangers. And now, certain things have noticed you.
Once more, I felt a shiver running down my spine.
You best stop this madness now, young man, and get off this thing. It's not worth it.
Well, to be honest with you, I do kind of want to. But this is day 6, and I told myself I'm going to see this through. There's no way I can give up now. When the man heard this, he just shook his head.
Let me repeat myself, it's not worth it. But I guess your mind's set. I hope you don't find to regret your choice.
With that, he got up from his seat, walked off, and settled down in the tram car ahead of me. For a few more minutes, he just sat there. But in the moment it took me to glance outside and look back, he was gone. The next couple of hours were rather quiet. It was Saturday afternoon, and only a few people here and there entered the tram, headed into the inner city area. Once we passed through the busy part of town and left it behind once more, I soon found myself all alone again. We had just made it to the outskirts of the city when the tram doors opened behind me, and I was greeted by loud yelling and laughter. A second later, a group of 6 kids rushed past me. They were so fast, they seemed like nothing but colourful blurs. They began causing a ruckus in the tram car, then rushed back past me, giggling. I sat there rubbing my temples, and I was about to yell at them to knock it off, when one of them slapped me on the shoulder. "You're it," he called out, before he and his friends rushed past me once more. I watched them as they hurried into the tram car ahead, and how they tried their best to hide themselves. I thought nothing of it, and couldn't help but sigh a little when I saw one of them crawling below a set of seats, and another one trying to hide himself behind the ticket machine. A moment later, though, they were doing strange things, impossible things, and I suddenly felt myself shivering in my seat. I watched as one kid almost folded into himself, becoming smaller and smaller, while another one seemed to just melt between 2 seats, vanishing. I sat there, closed my eyes, and then opened them again. By that time, all 6 kids were gone. But every once in a while, I could still hear this muffled giggling. I just sat there, trying my best to ignore it. This is only happening because I'm all alone on here. All of these things, they only ever happen when the tram is nearly empty. Just wait until other people get back on. Then it'll all be over. My thoughts were interrupted when I felt a hand on my shoulder.
The children are waiting.
The hand's owner spoke from behind me. I froze. Without moving, I took a glance at the hand resting on my shoulder. It was old, wrinkly. Its fingers were too long, much too long. A moment later, as the sun pushed itself out from behind the clouds, I saw the shadow of whatever was standing behind me. It was giant, a monstrous shadow that seemed to spread over the entire tramcar, stretching further and further.
Well, why are you not playing?
No, I'm just... I didn't get to finish my excuse. This thing's hand closed around my shoulder, and I could feel its nails digging into my skin. I cringed in pain, but I kept my mouth shut. Don't scream. Don't move. But with each passing moment, it squeezed harder, and I felt its nails dig deeper into my flesh. Finally, I saw the tram approaching the next station, and I could see a group of people waiting for it. When the tram came to a stop, I was finally released.
Let's go, kids.
The thing behind me spoke again, and right away, all 6 kids reappeared, jumping out from behind seats and from places they shouldn't possibly have been. For the first time, I could make out their faces, and I wish I had not. They were nothing but mockeries, estimations of children's faces that were only half right. What made it even worse, though, was that I somehow recognized them. In the deepest corners of my mind, I knew that I'd seen them before. I couldn't help but shiver again as they raced past me. And then, they were gone. When the tram started moving again, driven by a strange sense of curiosity, I turned around. What I saw outside was the group of 6 kids standing around an old thing. It seemed to smile down at them. A second later, it turned towards me, and its eyes found mine. In an instant, the face changed. What had been a kind, smiling face became nothing but an angry, twisted visage. My breath caught in my throat, and I jerked back around, more than happy to leave these ghastly children and their guardian behind. This, however, was not the only weird thing that happened during the day. As always, those same weirdly recurring passengers entered the tram. By now, they had long become an almost normal part of the long ride. Just another strange thing amongst a plethora of them. Today was different, though. When my eyes fell upon one of these individuals, an older woman, I noticed the change right away. She wasn't minding her own business like she usually did. That day, I found her frowning slightly, measuring me up, almost as if she was examining me. I thought back to what that homeless dude had said. He'd told me I was marked, and that now others knew. I took a deep breath, and I averted my eyes, trying my best to ignore her. But I could feel her continuing to stare at me until she got off the tram. Only a few stations later, she got on again, and once more, she stared at me. I didn't look at her directly, only taking single, sideways glances. But I swear, her expression was now even angrier than when I had first spotted her. This behavior was true for every single one of them, and like her, their fierce stares became more twisted with each iteration. It made me feel restless and more than a tad bit anxious. I felt trapped, haunted by many sets of eyes staring at me and only me. When it became evening, the bustle of partygoers started again, and for the first time in hours I felt slightly relaxed. Under the constant buzz of people entering and leaving the tram, I felt hidden. And yet, I knew they were still there. I could feel their glances, even amongst the chaos that ruled over the tram. Eventually, though, as the tram grew emptier once more, I was once again met with dozens of them staring at me. It also seemed that, under the cover of the partygoers, they had moved closer. By now, they were all in the same tramcar as me, seemingly having encircled me. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore, and I finally spoke up. "What the hell do you want from me?" I called out. Yet, nothing happened. I got no answer. They just continued to stare at me. Before long, they began to remind me of the guy in dark clothes, the one I had encountered on day 3. They did not just sit in their seats anymore. They did not just stare at me, but they were leaning forward, their faces distorted by unadulterated rage. Their hands were at their sides on the seats, their feet shuffling over the floor, as if in anticipation of something. The worst, however, was that with each station, more of them would enter. When it's just one set of eyes staring at you, you can somewhat ignore it. You can handle it. But when it's dozens of them, twisted into sickening looks of pure hatred, you just can't. With everything I'd heard, with all the warnings I'd received, I knew something was about to happen. It just seemed that they were waiting for that something. In that instant, fear washed over me. Raw and hot fear that soon turned into panic. And I finally decided that that was it. I wouldn't just stay on here until God knows what would happen to me. Screw the long ride. Screw the tram. This is over. I closed my hand around my backpack, was about to get up, but at that moment, their angry glances changed. Simultaneously, they turned to smiles. Hungry smiles. That same feeling I'd had when I had tried to flee from that guy in black clothes came over me. If I would get up now, they would come for me, wouldn't they? That's what they were waiting for, wasn't it? I just stood there, at my row of seats, my hand closed around my backpack strap, unable to move. Then, the tram turned a corner, a bend that shouldn't be there, And just like that, we were headed toward another unlocation. Half defeated, and knowing I was trapped either way, I plopped down on my seat again and stared outside, overcome by that all too familiar feeling of miserable wonder. The entire area that we were passing through was covered in nothing but small buildings, shanty-like structures made up of nothing but rubble and trash. They seemed to have been put up without rhyme or reason, as if they were growing up from the ground like mushrooms. Between them, I saw things moving, twisted things that I could tell were not human. But it wasn't merely this shanty town that we'd arrived at. No, all of this was part of another location, built around it, as if part of an infection that spread further and further. The dim red light that flooded into the tram was enough, and one glance ahead told me that we were once more approaching Club Red. No, I thought, not this place again. I hoped that the tram would simply pass it by, that we would return to reality, that other people would enter the tram again, and I'd be able to flee. Instead, the tram approached a wide, arched opening and then drove forward, straight into Club Red itself. What I saw in there was utterly surreal. All I'd seen on night 4 was the building's exterior, and that was nothing but a mere taste of the insanity this place contained. It was nothing but a cesspool, an amalgamation of sin. All around us, that same strange psychedelic non-music was blaring. I saw these weird stalls everywhere. They were offering drinks, food, but also other things. In some of them, I thought I saw bound humans, or things that may have once been human. I saw strange rituals, people praying to disgusting, twisted idols, and so much more. Even here, even inside, the place defied the laws of physics. The walls were covered in doorways, all connected by a maddening network of stairs. Stairs that shouldn't work. And yet, they did. It was as if the works of MC Escher had become reality. In that moment, this strange, fascinated trance that had come over me broke, and I jerked back as I remembered where I was and what was happening around me. While I had been fixated outside, and I'd not given them any attention, it seemed that all these reoccurring passengers had inched closer towards me, and they were now surrounding me. I opened my mouth to throw them another set of insults, to tell them to back off, when suddenly, the tram's doors opened. Instantly, the air filled with a disgustingly sweet odor. A stench so oppressive, it almost made me vomit. It smelled of strange spices, of bodily fluids, of blood. Yet, this wasn't the worst thing. I noticed a familiar figure approaching the tram, and before I could even react, it entered. Its limbs were bent at strange angles, as if they had too many joints inside them. Limbs sprouting from places that they just shouldn't. I watched as its head pushed forward, its neck stretching further and further as it scanned around the interior of the tram. And then, one step at a time, this monstrosity made its way through the tram on its spidery limbs, slowly getting closer towards me. I just sat there, mouth open in shock, not able to do anything but stare ahead. No, it couldn't be. Why was this thing here? Why the hell was it back? Cold sweat broke out all over my body, and I just sat there, my hands holding onto the seat in front of me. I began to shake uncontrollably. Oh God, I thought, as I watched it getting closer. It's coming for me. This time, it's actually coming for me. By now, the people around me were all grinning. I understood now. This is what they've been waiting for. It seemed clear now. They weren't able to do anything to me. They were not able to hurt me. But this thing could. As I watched this twisted monstrosity take another step, as it stalked forward in my direction on its spidery limbs, I just freaked out. I screamed in terror, jumped off my seat, and I dashed for the tram doors. I didn't want to go out there. Hell, I really shouldn't. But I wasn't in control of my body. At this point, it was nothing but pure primal instinct that drove me. But then, the doors closed, right there in front of me. For a mad second, I clawed at them, tried to pry them open with sheer force. But before I could, the tram started to move again, trapping me inside. Shit, what the hell do I do? Then, with no other option, I rushed to the back of the tram, praying that we would return to reality, to my city, to another station that would allow me to get away. Outside, we left Club Red behind, but then continued on through this ever-extending shanty town. Shit, why are we not back yet? I sat in the back, huddled behind a seat, trying my best to keep the panic at bay. But one glance forward made it impossible. By now, that disgusting thing had almost reached the last tram car, and for a moment, its eyes focused on me. Its jaw fell open, unhinged like that of a snake, and a distorted bout of guffawing laughter escaped from it. At that moment, I couldn't fight the panic anymore. I jumped up, my hand closing around one of the emergency glass breakers. And then, with all the force I could muster, I swung it against the window. It crashed against the glass again and again before finally the window shattered. A moment later, I threw myself outside. I landed hard on the asphalt, my hands and knees exploding with pain. I felt the skin of my hands being scraped away, and I felt my knees crunch hard against the road. Then, I felt myself being propelled forward, rolling over the street. I heard a horn. I heard brakes. I heard screeching. But somehow, I narrowly avoided the oncoming car by a hair's breadth. As I lay there on the ground, I was panting in terrible pain. When I finally looked up, all was normal. There was no hint of any unlocation. Instead, I was on an entirely normal street, in my entirely normal city. By now, the driver of the car had jumped out, his face a mixture of anger and worry, and a moment later, the tram driver followed. While the driver of the car asked if I was okay, the tram driver began laying into me. He called me crazy for destroying the window and jumping off. He spat at me, accusing me of being drunk or on drugs, or just downright insane. Instead of reacting to any of these words, I just stared back at the tram. It was empty. No one was inside. None of the recurring passengers. No twisted, spidery monster. I could only listen as the tram driver explained to the other man what had happened. Apparently, I had jumped off my seat, screaming and freaking out before I'd broken a window and jumped off, even though I had been entirely alone on the tram. I opened my mouth to tell them what had happened, but then I closed it again. What the hell could I even tell them? In the end, all I could do was drag my battered body to the sidewalk and sit down. By now, the tram driver had called the police and informed them about what I'd done. To be honest, I could have tried to run, to get away. But in the state I was in at the time, it seemed impossible. As I sat there, I thought back to that old man, to the vision of his torn apart and broken body. If that car had hit me, something similar would have most likely happened to me. Was that what all of this had been about? Had all of those people, had that monster been nothing but visions to drive me over the edge, to get me to go crazy and end up getting myself killed? When the police arrived, they were quick to take the statements of both drivers before they spoke to me as well. Then they took me to the station and questioned me for almost half an hour. In the end, I told them that I just had a panic attack, that I couldn't breathe, and I thought I'd die unless I got off the tram. Which, honestly, was not an untrue statement. They were skeptical to say the least, and they subjected me to not only an alcohol but also a drug test, which both came out negative. I was essentially let off the hook, but not entirely scot-free. They did charge me with vandalism, and I would have to pay for the tram window I'd destroyed, which came to almost $1,000. They also told me I should consult professional help and see myself checked in. I mumbled a thanks and was eventually allowed to leave. And so, the long ride ended on day 6 in the early hours of the morning. What I'm left with now is nothing but a tale I can share only here, because you guys are the only people willing to believe any of the crazy shit I've seen. I'd like to thank you all for staying with me, for your thoughts on what happened, and for following me along on this crazy adventure. I'd have never thought things would get out of hand like this, and there are still so many questions I'll probably never find answers for. But I would also like to leave you guys with a word of warning, or reiterate those given to me multiple times. Don't do it. There are things out there which wait for people who linger, who stay in the same place for too long. They are dangerous things that will find you and will come for you. And maybe, just maybe, you won't be as lucky as I was.